Support for this podcast comes from the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative, connecting communities with the resources, infrastructure, and networks to ensure a vibrant local free press.
From KVPR in Fresno, this is Central Valley Daily. It's Thursday, November 7th. I'm Elizabeth Arkalian. Coming up, a new proposal could alter how water is delivered to the Central Valley.
It includes rules and regulations and guidelines for how to operate these systems of dams, canals, and pumps that provide water for millions of people and millions of acres of farmland.
We will hear why many environmentalists are against the proposal, but first, today's headlines. Although California overwhelmingly voted for Vice President Kamala Harris on Tuesday, ballots from the San Joaquin Valley tell a different story about who voters want. KVPR's Carrie Klein reports on the state's partial ballot results.
As of Wednesday afternoon, Harris was leading statewide with 57% of votes. Former President Donald Trump trailed with 40%. But in the Valley, that margin was almost exactly flipped, with Trump leading 57% to 40%. The national tally is somewhere in the middle, with Trump ahead of Harris by only a few percentage points. All this with ballots from less than half of the Valley's registered voters. Although more voters showed up on Tuesday than in the March primary, turnout appears to have been lower this week than in both of the last two general elections. Elections officials are still processing votes. California's Secretary of State's office has until December 13th to certify election results. For KVPR News, I'm Carrie Klein.
With election results still trickling in from Tuesday, the Fresno Bee is reporting some local results. One of those is for the 3rd District of the Fresno County Board of Supervisors. There, the Bee reports Fresno City Council member Luis Chavez has defeated incumbent Sal Quintero. As of Thursday morning, Chavez leads with 54% of the vote. Quintero has served on the Board of Supervisors in 2 different stints, most recently serving since 2016. The city of Fresno says it's ending its lease agreements with the operator of a well-known Central Fresno sports complex. On Wednesday, the city said it's terminating its lease with the Central Valley Community Sports Foundation, which operates the complex known as Granite Park. Officials say the foundation owes the city more than $1.3 million. The debt includes unpaid utility bills in addition to revenue from billboards. In a statement, the city said it would no longer be, quote, subsidizing the foundation's operations. The city issued an official notice of termination to the foundation on Wednesday. A historic Valley courthouse from the 1800s will soon become a brewery. The old Kings County Courthouse in the city of Hanford has sat mostly vacant for years, but the city council decided this week to sell it to a firm that operates craft beer producer Barrel House Brewing. The price tag? $1. The sale is meant to keep the historic building intact. City officials said the building needs millions of dollars in improvements that would be too costly for the city. The building also does not provide much revenue for the city as it currently stands.
Support for Central Valley Daily comes from the members of KVPR. Join at $8 or more per month and access ad-free NPR podcasts through NPR Plus. Give now at kvpr.org/donate.
And now to our main story. State and federal officials are close to choosing a new plan to manage how water from the Sacramento-San Joaquin River Delta is distributed from Northern California to the southern part of the state. The California Aqueduct and the Delta-Mendota Canal play a critical role in moving the water to farms and people across the Central Valley and then down to the Los Angeles metropolitan region. When new water distribution plans were last considered 5 years ago, California officials and environmentalists objected to the plan, which was eventually adopted. They said it would increase the chances that several species of fish would go extinct in the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta. Now, 5 years later, according to many environmentalists, the plans proposed by the President Biden and Governor Newsom administrations do not really change any of the issues raised last time. Instead, they say it worsens the threat to some of the vulnerable fish populations. Alastair Bland's a reporter for CalMatters and wrote in depth about the different proposals that are up for consideration. He joined me for a conversation and discussed the main proposed plan and its alternatives.
The plan is currently sort of in draft form. It consists of several alternatives for how the plan might be carried out. The plan pertains to the operation of the State Water Project and the Central Valley Project. And so it includes rules and regulations and guidelines for how to operate these systems of dams, canals, and pumps that provide water for millions of people and millions of acres of farmland.
Why is this plan coming up now?
That's a good question. This plan for how to operate these facilities is not updated on a routine basis, definitely not annual. The last time it was updated was in roughly 2019. The federal government came out with a new plan for operating these facilities. It was controversial. Environmental organizations and the state as well objected, saying that the rules that were in that plan were going to threaten the survival of several fish species. So there was a lot of fuss. There were a couple of lawsuits filed, and what we have now is the outcome of that objection to the previous plan.
Okay, so if approved, this new plan would basically update and modify the guidelines for distributing water from the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta to flow down the California Aqueduct and the Delta-Mendota Canal, which is a series of water channels that move water down the western side of the Central Valley, with much of that water then being distributed out in the LA County area. And also along the way, a lot of Central Valley farmers are also getting water. So with the aqueducts and deltas impacting so many areas, and there are a lot of agencies involved in this decision-making process, as you mentioned, can you just explain who's ultimately responsible for what and who kind of has the final say in how this type of a plan gets adopted?
Well, there are, like I mentioned, the two systems for conveying water that are involved in this plan. That's the State Water Project run by the Department of Water Resources. And then there's the Central Valley Project run by the Bureau of Reclamation. So it's the Bureau of Reclamation and the Department of Water Resources that operate the facilities that are encompassed in this plan. Meanwhile, all parties have to abide by rules that are set by or enforced by Fish and Wildlife Service and Department of Fish and Wildlife for the interests of endangered species. There's also the State Water Resources Control Board, which is the top referee of water regulations in California, and they were involved at some level in the design of this plan as well. But ultimately, the water systems are operated by the Department of Water Resources and the Bureau of Reclamation. Those two agencies ultimately will make a joint decision on which alternative, there's several alternatives being considered, which alternative will be selected and how the final plan will look.
So, Alastair, this plan was originally developed under the Trump administration, but now has the approval of the Biden administration and Governor Gavin Newsom's administration. But environmentalists are saying that this plan is worse. Why is that?
Yeah, it seems counterintuitive. It doesn't make a lot of sense. This plan was supposed to replace the plan that was allegedly threatening species with their survival, and now the replacement plan, according to some, is worse. It sounds implausible, but by some measurements, it does seem to be worse. For example, the analysis of the new plan, the analysis was conducted by the Bureau of Reclamation. There's deeply embedded deep in the plan. It's hard to find, but there's a table that predicts the number of winter-run Chinook salmon juveniles that will be produced by spawning under the conditions implemented with the new plan. And in critically dry years, that number of juvenile salmon that are produced by spawning fish will be 23% lower than the same number under the previous set of rules. And this is all numbers that come out of complex modeling. So they're not actually counting fish when they do this, but they're making predictions. So that's one example. That's a significant drop in the spawning success of winter-run Chinook, which are endangered.
So what's next? Do we have a timeline for when a new plan will be chosen and adopted?
Yes, there is a timeline. Coming up next, the federal fish agencies, that's the National Marine Fisheries Service, that's NMFS, and the Fish and Wildlife Service. They will release reports coming out in the next few weeks called biological opinions. Each of them releases one. And in these reports, they determine if the plan under review right now will actually jeopardize the survival of any particular species. They'll make a a jeopardy ruling or a no jeopardy ruling. And that's in the next few weeks. Then about a month later or so, I guess by December 20th, I think is the deadline, the Bureau of Reclamation and the Department of Water Resources will jointly decide which alternative for this carrying out this plan will be selected.
And to clarify, these different alternatives are small changes in features to the same ultimate plan. There's different iterations of the plan, right?
Yeah, these different alternatives, there's 4 or 5 of them. One of them is called a no action alternative, and it basically the 2019 rules, which are actually still in place. So that the no action alternative would be taking no action and just going back to the previous rules. And then there's several other alternatives which provide new rules and guidelines and the regulations for how to manage the same water system. But yeah, they all pertain to the same system of water facilities.
Alastair Bland covering water for CalMatters. Thanks, Alastair.
Thanks, Elizabeth.
And that does it for today. Today's episode was produced by Jonathan Linden and KVPR with support from the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative. I'm Elizabeth Arkalian. Find the latest local news anytime at kvpr.org.
No matter what happens in Washington, the NPR Politics Podcast is here for you. For the latest news, insights, and analysis from the election and beyond, listen to the NPR Politics Podcast.